So I'll let everyone know right off the bat, this is not going to be the most entertaining video. It's a lot of product specifications and looking at different projectiles. It's also fairly tailored to people that have some sort of experience hand loading or are familiar with different bullet weights, powder loads, and how everything affects each other, since I won't directly talk about a lot of that. Even if you're pretty new into it or don't have a lot of experience hand loading, I think there's still a lot of information you can pull away from this that might help you with your projectile choice and round selection when it comes to the 300 AAC Blackout. Brass preparation and selection is a very important aspect of the 300 Blackout cartridge. Since it is designed around the 556 or 223 brass, you can easily use your spent 556 or 223 cases to convert them to 300 Blackout. What you would do is use something like a Harbor Freight mini chop saw and chop it right at the shoulder to achieve a decent length on there. Run it through your sizing and depriming die to get a rough piece of 300 Blackout brass. Since 556 brass is crimped, you will need to take a primer pocket reamer to open that up and remove the crimp a little bit. Once that's done, go ahead and clean out the primer pocket just to remove any gunk. Then you'll run it through a trimmer to get it down to your desired length. Generally 1.357 inches seems to be what works well for me and what I would recommend. Then of course take your chamfer and deburr tool to clean up the brass one last time, and you're pretty much good to go after that. For primers, I would recommend something like CCI number 400 small rifle primers. Also be aware that because 300 Blackout is a lower pressure round, especially in Subsonic, you're going to get a little more life out of your brass than you would with some other rifle rounds. Supersonic projectiles are what I would recommend most people starting to shoot 300 Blackout look at. Subsonics really only shine in suppressed applications, and you're going to be losing a lot of performance by going subsonic. Your Supersonics are going to have similar but not identical ballistics to the 7.62x39 cartridge that a lot of people are familiar with from AK and AKM platforms. General weights of supersonic ammo are between 110 to 155 grains. We'll work up the ladder and discuss an 110 grain round. This is a Hornet A VMAX. I found it very accurate. It's very inexpensive and a good choice to start with. It's got good velocity behind it as well. Another phenomenal choice, but a little more expensive, is the 110 grain TAC TX round by Barnes, specifically designed for the 300 Blackout to expand at lower velocities. It is pricey, but it's something I highly recommend as well. Moving up to 125 grain projectiles, the Sierra Match King is ideal for accuracy and range use. It's a little more pricey than some, but it's my go-to range round. I find it's one of the best projectiles as far as non-expanding things for 300 Blackout, and one that I believe everybody loading or considering needs to look into. It's also widely available in commercial ammo choices. Some other 125 grain choices that are great, primarily for hunting applications, are the 125 grain Hornet A SST projectile and the 125 grain Nosler ballistic tip. They both run extremely well, reliable, accurate. The SST is a little more affordable, but the Nosler ballistic tip is kind of my go-to hunting round. I really enjoy that projectile. If we want to look at accuracy on that specific round, this is a 5-shot group at 50 yards using the Nosler ballistic tip. It's not dialed in as far as glass goes. I was purely shooting for groups, but hopefully you can see that there is a lot of accuracy potential there. Moving up to things like the 155 grain AMAX round here, or a lot of the commercially available 147 grain, I think it's a bit heavy. You're going to have more weight on target, but you're going to lose velocity. The 300 Blackout velocity is already a bit slower than most 30 caliber projectiles are designed for, so it's really going to hurt your expansion. It's a fine range and plinking round, but I would not use it for defensive or hunting applications. Again, these are all loaded up with W296 or H110. H110 is also another good choice, as is Little Gun. Those are kind of the three powders for supersonic uses that you might want to look into. Powder volume and case overall length is going to vary wildly depending on the weight of the bullet and what you're actually tuning it for. I'm not going to give any specific recipes for these. However, if you are curious about some of my specific loads, feel free to send me a private message and I'll share some information with you on that. For subsonic application, I highly recommend using a suppressor. The suppressor's added back pressure allows subsonic rounds to cycle reliably. A lot of people with shorter 300 blackouts are going to run into issues of not getting enough dwell time or buffer weights or a number of other things that are going to result in failure to feeds and failures to lock back on an empty mag. Aside from that, you're really losing a lot of performance shooting subsonic ammunition without a suppressor for very little gain. Of course, if you want to, by all means go for it, but it's really not ideal. Two kings kind of in the subsonic category, in my opinion, are the 208 grain Hornet A AMAX. I find that's a very good round and fairly affordable. However, the king of subsonic ammo is the 220 grain Sierra Match King. This is a little bit more pricey, but I think it's a bit better projectile. If I had the option and money wasn't a concern, I would use the Sierra Match Kings all day long. However, for plinking subsonic and having fun suppressed, since the 208 AMAX are a little more inexpensive, that's a good choice for me to go to as well. I find accurate 5744 to be a great powder for subsonic rounds. It's generally, in some people's opinions, a little more accurate but a little less reliable than the other major subsonic powder, and that would be A1680, which is also a phenomenal choice, but be warned, both of those can be a little bit difficult to obtain. There's a number of companies, again, such as Fog Firearms, doing 220 grain Sierra Match King commercial ammo for a fairly affordable price. So it is not necessarily a bad idea to look at commercial subsonic ammo, especially when we're looking at possible reliability issues and 200 plus grain projectiles being pricey as it is. Okay, so I know that's a lot of information, and it might have been too specific for some folks, and it might have been a little too generic for others. But hopefully you're able to kind of figure out a little bit what grain weights you might look into for both supersonic and subsonic rounds, as well as kind of how to convert brass over and brass preparation if you're looking to load 300 Blackout. If you guys have any questions, concerns, comments, advice, anything at all like that, please do feel free to leave it in the comments section. Also, as I said, if you do want some more specific information as far as recipes I use, feel free to send me a private message on YouTube or Google Plus Hangouts, and I'd be happy to share some of that information.